Hey all you whiskey lovers, have you ever wondered why mason jars or kind of ball jars were so popular for moonshining? Well, let's dive into it. Today we're going to talk about how jars like this, jars that you might have seen when you were canning or storing different goods at home, became so iconic and so popular when moonshining. Some people might say or speculate that, hey, there wasn't a lot of, let's say, glass available or bottles available during Prohibition because, hey, you weren't supposed to make whiskey, so why would you be able to make a bottle associated with it? That's definitely true, but there was other reasons behind it, and there's even more interesting reasons in creativity about why ball or mason, as we call them now, mason jars, became so popular when at the time there was a lot of competition in the market. And why did moonshiners pick this particular brand and this particular version when storing their moonshine? Now, firstly, without getting too much into the history of moonshining, we've talked about before, you probably know what it is and kind of the concept of moonshining yourself. But what's interesting is that we are usually talking about farmers. Moonshiners were usually people which had crop, which knew how to distill, probably because they've been doing it on their own farms, but they were experts in it and they enjoyed it and they knew how to do it. They wanted to continue doing it. Makes sense. Now, what do all farmers have to deal with? I mean, of course, there's the dirt, there's the crop, there's the grain, but what I'm actually referring to or wanted to make you think about a little bit more is the weather. If you're a farmer, the pros and cons are when the weather is nice and it's rainy and moist, you have a good crop. If it's too cold and it's too windy or it's snowing, hey, well, now what are you going to do? You can't really continue or expect to be creating enough crop to feed yourself and your family. Okay, what does that mean? You probably learned how to pickle, how to can, how to jar different types of, let's say, fruits, vegetables. Maybe it's peaches. Maybe you made a strawberry jam or marmalade. Whatever it is, how'd you store it? How'd you keep it? Probably in a jar like this. This meant that jars like this were readily available. You could get them in any grocery store, any general store had something like this, and it was very easy for you to pick up. It was inconspicuous. I just need jars for my jarring, for my canning. And at the same time, they are pretty hard, sturdy materials. They are easy to open. They are easy to close, and they have a very good gasket on top usually, or they're the metal screw tops. And all of this means it is very convenient and makes a very solid, replaceable seal. Again, we're talking about high-proof alcohol here. So if you had a lot of, let's say, you're going to have fumes, it's going to be very strong and pungent, being able to seal it up very tight and have a very good firm seal means that you're not going to be losing a lot of the fumes. And if you've ever left a bottle of whiskey open overnight by accident, in the morning or the next time you try it, it will taste very different and not in a good way. So it's actually very good also for the preservation of that whiskey, for the preservation of that spirit, moonshine. So quality was very good, seal was very good. Now, one thing that you might not have considered is right now, this is some sugar, but as you can clearly see up there too, but this here is see-through. This glass here is see-through. I can see through it, and it's very clear if I look at this, even without my little label, that there's sugar inside. Now, the original glasses, the mason jars or ball jars which were being used, were not actually see-through. They were kind of an opaque color, kind of like what you would imagine from that period of time. They weren't able to create such a clear, perfect see-through glass. And this was actually in the favor of moonshiners. If you had a truck bed and everybody was transporting these one way or another, but you're hiding them, they're in the back of your car, or wherever, you could probably mix in some moonshine and some of your other canned products or pickled products, and it would not be so easy to see or distinguish because you could not see through it like you can new jars or modern day jars. And they were the same jars being used for different things. So it also helped you hide and conceal them other than the quality. Now, what most people do not know is a mason jar, or if you look at that jar, you're kind of thinking this one's from IKEA, maybe you can make it out there, but it's perfectly round. And this, I see more and more moonshines being made in a round, completely circular glass, kind of like this, which doesn't necessarily make sense. The reason that Ball and Mason, because I'm kind of using them interchangeably, Ball is the company that made them. Mason, I believe, is the Mr. Mason. Mason's the family name of the guys who started and actually owned the company, Ball. Made a very interesting decision with their jars very early on. They recognized, and I don't think this is ever formally said or documented, but they did some things that made their jars more convenient to use for moonshiners, especially in the realm of transportation. Again, this is kind of the typical jar that you see, and then this is what you would expect more of in the moonshiner days. This being a relatively square or rounded square container. And the benefit of this is you could pack more of them side by side and then have less moving around in the car versus the round ones would jitter, would move around a bit more. It wasn't so fixed and tight. Having multiple squarish containers meant that they were better placed next to each other. And if you're concealing them and getting them from point A to point B, they would not be as loud, obnoxious, and also because there's less movement, less chance of it breaking. Because moonshine was also expensive, not alone dangerous. If it breaks and you have high-proof alcohol on a vehicle that could probably still catch on fire, you don't want that to happen. So the design and the concept of making it rectangular, not, or let's say squared, flat edges, and not just round all around, was very clever and a good way for them to make their glasses more preferred over others which were just around during that time. Now, it's also worthy to say that although, and I love the fact that we use kind of mason jars still to this day to show moonshine, this was a large population or a large way of distribution of moonshine. However, you cannot imagine that all moonshine was always put into such a container. People used whatever they had. It could have been ceramic jugs. It could have been different containers, even for oil or paint or whatnot. And they had hopefully cleaned it out and used it to transport different goods. People used whatever they could get their hands on. And in the southern Appalachian Mountains, mainly farmland, these were very easy. And we also associate a lot of moonshiners coming from the Appalachian Mountains. So again, it makes sense. Now, this is also why at March Distilling, we decided to go ahead and use rectangular bottles. I mean, of course, we already discussed transportation and moving them around is much easier. But instead of picking something which is round, I wanted to pick something which, again, is square or rectangular in my case, but pays a little bit more homage to original moonshine and original American spirits versus something, again, which is round or a typical Scotch or something like that. Or kind of what I would associate with Irish or Scotch whiskeys or traditional whiskeys. After moonshine, I like the fact that they're square. And there's good reasons to why they are. I hope you enjoyed this little tangent about why moonshine was stored in something like this and why it actually made sense, has historical backing, and is not just marketing that we use today without any reason other than just an old story. It is based a little bit on truth, and I hope you liked it. With that, as always, cheers to you. Your next glass of whiskey may be out of a jar. With not whatever this is, but like actual whiskey. Cheers. Bye all.